Hey, honestly, when I thought of this video idea, I didn't know there was a new episode of Madness Combat coming out. So yeah, kind of a funny timing, but whatever I guess. The episode was focused on Sanford in his purgatory anyway, whom I might make a video of later. And yes, I missed Madness Day, but like, a new Madness Combat episode just dropped, so I think it would be a perfect time to do this. So let's get to our main topic now. In this first installment of the series, we get an introduction to Hank J. Wimbleton. Not much is shown about him in this, except the fact that he's irritable, violent, and fearless, as shown by how he get annoyed by the boombox loud noise and immediately went to murdering after getting punched off by the boombox guy, and as in fearless because of how he already prepared to fight Jeb when he appeared. Other than his personality, he also shown to be very skilled in both hand-to-hand combat and weaponry, as shown on how easily he able to fend off hordes of grunt, and very strong physically as how he easily able to rip off someone's head and withstand being violently slammed to the ground multiple times by Jack. So, in the end, it's questionable too if Hank was irritated by the music or if he wants the boombox for himself. In the second installment, we see Hank try to hunt down the sheriff. The reason for this hunt is unknown, but it seemed to be important enough for Hank to go after. We are shown more of his tactical skills in this, like his use of grenade to break through the ceilings, or his use of surroundings, like staggering an enemy for them to be his shield. In a later scene, it shows that Hank didn't try to follow and hunt down Jeb after he revived the dead, implying that in this point in the series, Hank hasn't deemed him as important as killing the sheriff yet, and following him would just jeopardize his mission, though he seemed to be more merciful to the one he thinks is useful, as shown when he didn't shoot a grunt who gave him the sheriff location, instead just knocking him out. But his sole focus on just the sheriff cost him his life at the hands of Jeb. After his death, he was given a second chance, a recurring theme surrounding Hank's character. He's now back, wanting to avenge his death on the sheriff, and presumably Jeb as well. But this hunt by Hank caused the sheriff to activate the improbability drive, a device that would cause more problem for Hank in the near future. In this installment, we are shown more of Hank's ruthlessness on people around him, that he do not care about their lives. He will get rid of them as fast as possible if they are a threat, as shown both when he snapped a neck of a guy who was trying to bite a snack, and shooting Jeb, then goes back to hunt down sheriff after he vanished. So, his focus still cost him his life at the hands of Jeb once more. But this time, he still have enough time to knock out Jeb and finish off Sheriff before succumbing to his wound. We begin this installment with Hank's past death, murder, and tricky, while text popping on screen saying no regret, no remorse, no reason, and only madness. Describing this series up to this point, but also describing Hank's character as no regret to how he has no regret on trying to pursue the sheriff that caused his death twice, or his massacre over a boombox. No remorse. As been said, he do not care about other people's lives that he has to take to complete his goal. No reason. His reasons, or sometimes lack thereof, that result in these madness are not things that could be considered as reasonable. And finally, only madness. Hank is enjoying all of these massacre he commit. Why else would he do this? The madness part are followed by Hank murder of two guys and wanting to kill every person in the club. The reason for this might be because the club is an associate with the sheriff, due to the poster of sheriff and Hank wanted poster being plastered around the wall, and the first appearance of 1137 agents, which are the member of the AAHW, which allies with the sheriff. Later, he meet Tricky and immediately started firing, possibly assuming Tricky is still allies with the AAHW due to his past allegiance with the sheriff and wanted to get rid of him as soon as possible. But because Tricky got up, Hank tried to kill him again with his sword, after making through the horde of grunts. But Jeb break in first. Here, we are shown the only time Hank sweat against an enemy, which is interesting because he never sweat to any other enemies after this episode, even to Jeb himself. This might be due to how Jeb killed him twice now before this, which almost happened again, but before dying, he took Jeb and himself down with a detonator, killing him and splitting Jeb in half. This episode and the previous one shown that Hank, even if he's going down, he will still try to succeed his mission as far as he can before death, and this determination might be how he come back from the death multiple times and only need to cover himself in bandages to help himself get on his feet again. And this wouldn't be the last time he revived himself from death to succeed his mission. Hank is back once more for more massacre of the members of the AAHW, either for his own satisfaction or cause of the sheriff's allegiance, or both. But Hank isn't the only one who is still alive. Jeb is also still alive. They're more of a rival to each other now, due to how Hank wanting to murder people and Jeb wanting to make Nevada peaceful again. With their ongoing feud, Hank deemed Jeb important enough for him to take down, due to Jeb interrupting his mission on killing the members of the AAHW. But not long after, a new threat has appeared for Hank to deal with. Tricky, with the improbability drive planted in it. After Tricky ripped off half of Jeb's face, even though Hank sliced Tricky's head in half, presumably killing him, Tricky revived himself and killed Hank via decapitation. This is the beginning of Hank's hatred and somewhat fear of Tricky begins, as we will see in 9.5. In his own purgatory, Tricky still appears in all form for Hank to deal with, and what Hank do in antipathy. Hank denied death once more, and it seems Tricky either knows this or is the one responsible due to a note leaving on the ground saying just do what comes natural. Tea and some weapons for Hank, which Hank takes and went after Tricky, which is like a somewhat parallels to how Hank wouldn't let Sheriff got away so easily, and learning from his mistake, try to watch his back more often because of how Jeb killed him twice before with the Sheriff. After getting on Tricky's train and finding Tricky, he's determined to take down Tricky and kill him, without him jumping off the train to Tricky's section and grabbing on Tricky's weapon to not be thrown off the train and risk having Tricky get away again. While having a melee combat with Tricky after the train crashes, killed by Tricky, he got revived by Tricky again, which implied that Tricky is the one responsible for Hank's revival in the beginning of this episode, or know how to make Hank's revival process quicker. After that, Tricky dropped a building for Hank to go through, knowing that it would slow Hank down enough due to Hank's need for violence and the killings of the AAHW. But Hank caught up, axed Tricky in the head, and to make an extra precaution due to his experience with Jeb, shoot multiple rounds into Tricky's body and releasing him into the pit. So he, as Hank thought, would actually die, unlike Jeb, but he seems to know that Tricky still has a chance to come back, and waited there to actually finish Tricky once and for all, so he could be rid of Tricky's annoyance and threat. So, Tricky revealed in his new form, Hank isn't faced by Tricky at all, and started to shoot once more. So, Hank is fearless against Tricky new form. He still got outclassed by Tricky in the end, but not killed completely, and he was still seen struggling even after being ripped in half. This might be how his revival in 3, 4, 5 happened, which is Hank still being able to cling to life even after his last moment, where he passed out for some time before getting on his feet again. But with Tricky's annoyance of wanting Hank to get up, Hank got revived again by Tricky, much to Hank's annoyance. Before Hank can confront Tricky again, Tricky summons the buildings and the 113 agent for Hank to fight and escape from Tricky. Hank, even though seemingly much weaker due to his body not having the experience of those body injuries anymore, and revived in a new form by Tricky, still got his hand-to-hand combat and weaponry as usual before his resurrection. He managed to hit Tricky's improbability drive and managed to escape and gain some weapons for a short time before fleeing, implying that Hank at this point is not so confident to face Tricky right now. Contrast to his determination to kill someone like when he got up against Jeb or Sheriff or his upcoming fight with the Mac agent, a being that has an upgrade to both its strength and durability, whom he tried to steal the weapon from. This might be because he didn't have the weapons he thinks he needs to defeat Tricky as of yet. His need for violence showed itself once more after him choosing to use a chainsaw instead of any long-range weapon against the AAHW agents from an armory he found, which revealed itself to be surprisingly useful due to it being able to cut through the Mac agent face. But Hank still got hit by a bullet that broke him from his focus on the blood spewing out of the Mac agent. But he met Tricky again, whom he tried to stay away from before trying to slice him with the chainsaw. With how smaller Tricky is and how it seems like Hank has no better options, Hank decides to face him again with his hand-to-hand combat and his usual use of the surrounding, but he still got defeated and knocked outside of the building. Before getting killed by Tricky or the agents outside, Jeb appeared, stabbing Hank in the throat and shooting him in the face, making sure that Hank will actually die this time, before shooting Tricky's improbability drive that Tricky left outside, killing him too. Doc ordered Sanford and Deimos to retrieve Hank's body for revival and upgrade, signifying that Hank is unable to revive himself like before, either because of the improbability drive being more active than usual at the time of his death, or his state that was revived by Tricky tainted his own revival ability, or the injury he sustained by Jeb's sword and revolver. Hank's body was thrown into the machine that is for reviving and upgrading Hank before Deimos was shot, making the upgrade half complete and turned Hank into a half mech instead of a full one. With Hank being revived, he used Deimos' body as a bait and goes to blow up the enhanced engineer made by Auditor. Hank, now with his new body that is double in size and has a new crustaceous looking arm with a claw hand, sees Auditor and goes to stab him before he disappears and getting attacked by the new Mac agent, showing his new form in motion, being able to go toe to toe with the Mac agent, knocking it back with just a punch and stabbing it to the ground off the cliff before he met up with Sanford and teams up to try and fight the Auditor. But before they can go in, Auditor absorbed the corpses around Nevada to gain himself even more power before attacking Hank and Sanford. We are taken back to before Hank was revived, and how he's doing in the purgatory, which seems to be Doc trying to hack in the place and revive Hank, but got denied by the place. After that, we are taken to the place with 3 grunt, 1 with no black mark and 2 with different black mark placement, before one of them turned into Hank. The black mark seemed to reflect Hank's injury before being killed, with the black mark on his left side of the face resembled the bullet hole by Jeb. The low face mark and some of the one below his neck resembled the decapitation he received. And the cracked black mark on the left side of his body resembled the injuries he received after trying to fight Tricky in consternation. After becoming himself again, the agents appear, and Hank immediately goes into fighting and killing them all, before hearing voices by a nearby corpses of the grunt, before the voice screamed Hank, signifying Tricky's presence in Hank's purgatory before the bodies was pummeled into the ground and giving birth to a new Tricky on the ceiling, resembling his pre-zombification color but with his zombification features and with his improbability dive speed. Hank then fight the new Tricky before killing him, but before he can leave, we've seen that Hank is grown conscious about Tricky's revival ability, that he hold a piston on him intending to kill him as fast as he revived, learning from his death in depredation. After that, he moves on to explore this space and murder some people on the way before he sees Tricky again and goes down to kill him before he poses any threat to him in here. In this fight, we are shown of how agile Hank is, with him jumping on the walls and dodging bullets, something that isn't shown much before. After that, Hank meets the Retainer, a being that prevents people in the other place, the place where Hank arrived after his death, to escape, especially Hank. Hank tried to shoot Retainer, but got punched through the wall before he can land any hits on it. Even though knocked down and suffered some head pains, he still isn't knocked out, and grabs some weapon to protect himself from the Retainer, before being force choked by the Retainer and pummeled into the ground below, and being retained by it. After that, a text on screen said that Hanks is retained, but a crustaceous looking arm with a claw as hand appeared, and the text instead said that one unretained Hank, implying that there are multiple Hanks in this place, and most of them had been retained, except one that has escaped. This means that Hank's past revival have been sending multiple forms of himself into the other place. Later, Antipathy Hank emerges, killing Engineer 1337 agent and a grunt, and use the grunt body to switch the lever that the grunt summoned. This creates an instant contrast between Antipathy Hank and the previous Hank, which we now call Consternation, where Antipathy Hank seems to be more violent and able to pick the grunt up and slam them into the lever, seemingly to be more physically stronger than Consternation, who so can punch the engineer into the wall, leaving the cracks behind, didn't injure the body as much without shoving a weapon into the target. But Antipathy is a lot less agile, with how he able to be caught by a kick from one of the soldiers and not being able to jump as high. After that, Antipathy checked the tablet he stole from the grunt and read the message on it, where it said, "Hank, we can escape, Hank, 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 but we can't stop you," referring to the Retainer preventing everyone to escape from the other place, before the tablet told Antipathy to turn around. Then, Antipathy do just that, turn around and jump down a cliff and attack the agents, engineer, and a grunt down below. Before Antipathy got the chance to choke the grunt, it pummeled itself to the ground, revealing to be Tricky, then escaped. Antipathy then got ambushed by the AAHW members before he can chase after Tricky. After finishing them off, he found Tricky, but before he can do anything to Tricky, the other AAHW members appear to ambush his Antipathy again. After he kills all of them, he goes to immediately slice Tricky's fate, but got pushed back by Tricky's roar, and have to fight Tricky with his elongated mouth, trying to keep his position far from Tricky so he wouldn't die like in depredation, before having to also confront Tricky in probability form. Even though he using a melee weapon, he's still trying to knock himself back after every slices, so he wouldn't get sneak attacked by the improbability form, and how he hold up his sword in front of himself, preparing to stab Tricky if he tried to pull the thing he did in depredation, before the improbability form slam his face into the wall, and the Retainer appeared to retain Antipathy. After the Retainer used the same punch he did to Consternation that caused him to get staggered for a little bit, the punch only shoved Antipathy to the wall, forcing him to try and escape the wall. After Tricky normal form appeared, distracting the Retainer with his stop sign and screamed at it before taunting Antipathy. Even though Tricky still poses a threat to Antipathy, he didn't care enough about Tricky to follow him through, and instead trying to escape, due to Tricky technically already is being rid of for this amount of time. But later, he found Tricky again, before immediately shot Tricky in the head and shoot Tricky several more times to try and kill him. So, the door has been opened and Tricky is dead. He isn't dead in this form. The improbability form come from behind Antipathy and grabbed him into the wall. Later, Antipathy woke up and saw a letter on the wall with the word, "Do what comes natural," the same ones Tricky left for him after his revival in Antipathy, with the word "kill and die" flashing on the letter, implying these two things to be Hank's natural things he always do, before a text appeared to warn Antipathy of the Retainer behind him, allowing him to once again not die from the sneak attack. While Antipathy fighting the Retainer, Tricky appears, throw the Retainer at the wall and acts as the distraction, allowing Antipathy to get another sword from the ground, but it's still no use, as Antipathy is being thrown beside Tricky's seemingly dead body. Tricky's body flew up and goes into the wall, distracting the Retainer once again, allowing Antipathy to try and grab the sword from the Retainer, but still no use. But luckily for them, Tricky returned with a chainsaw to slice the Retainer in the same fashion as Consternation Hank did to Mac Asian, and allows Antipathy to escape. This whole scene shows Hank's smart use of the surroundings and circumstances, with Tricky helping him against and distract the retainer, which allow him to damage the retainer for a little bit, even though that seemed to be ineffective, and using the time where Tricky is slicing the retainer to escape and gather more weapons. That, even if the guy who is helping him is the person he hates the most, if they are trying to help him to reach his end goal, he is welcome to their assist, which is an element that keeps consistent with Hank even in the non-canon incident series. After Antipathy finished off the AAHW members that tried to ambush him, he stayed conscious still for the chance of Tricky coming after him after seeing the sliced up retainer body. Due to the retainer's death, it allows Consternation Hank to be freed from the retain, though being more beaten up and shaky, but he's still able to fend off the several AAHW members that try to ambush and kill him. After that, he met Tricky again, who uses the rocks and the corpses to attack Consternation. Even though Consternation shot multiple rounds into him and his face, Tricky is still moving. Due to still being shaky after the retainer attack, Consternation was caught off guard and got Tricky to be able to grab onto him, but he managed to stab Tricky in the body and slicing it, with antipathy rising from the below. They both angrily gesture at Tricky, signifying the hate Hank has to Tricky, whether if it's Tricky's game on Hank, revivals, interruption on his and Jeb 1v1, or Tricky killing Hank twice now, with Antipathy pointing Tricky like he has found him, echoing back when he tried to chase Tricky down back in Antipathy, and Consternation shaking his fist due to the suffering Tricky has put on him with splitting him in half, then reviving him to play with him once more, and knocking him out, leading him to his death at the hands of Jeb. Antipathy jumped on him first before slicing him in half with the chainsaw and immediately goes to attack Consternation. I don't think there's an explanation I can recall for this, but it might be due to Tricky's deception on Antipathy, causing him to be cautious even around himself, or maybe he hates himself, or maybe Antipathy wanted more blood for his satisfaction. The Hank's battle with Antipathy getting the upper hand due to being more physically stronger. Before Antipathy pushed Consternation off a cliff, he got stabbed in the stomach by the crustaceous looking arm, with text popping on screen that said, "Hank, recovery, engage," signifying Hank's recovery process in aggregation, and changed into recovery imminent, meaning that Hank's body has already been thrown into the chamber already, before it exploded both with Antipathy and the arm, leaving Consternation in the other place. The reason why Antipathy was chosen is probably due to his more capable physicality, being less damaged from the retainer, more violent, and physically stronger than Consternation, with the episode taking us back to the time where Hank's body was thrown into the chamber and being injected, before flashing with the text that said, "I'll keep bringing them back." This might be another reason for Hank's revival in previous episodes, that the times he come back is due to him being able to survive long enough in the purgatory to be bring back by to be damned and leave some part of himself in the other place before he can come back. Or this could be due to Hank was half dead in Consternation before he was revived by Tricky, thus creating another himself in the other place. Regardless, Hank is revived, but at the cost of Deimos. The episode begins immediately after aggregation ending, where Hank decides to charge into Auditor, while Sanford stands behind seeing what to do. So, with his new semi-mech form, Hank still gets overwhelmed by the Auditor's newly enhanced power with the halo he acquired, and got his crustacean arm damaged by Auditor. Sanford keeps shooting, but the bullets are useless due to the Auditor's nature, but it helped Hank to snatch the halo from the Auditors from behind, so he didn't hold on to it for too long before something sacked him and made him drop the halo, and Auditor getting it back once again. But the thing that sapped Hank seems to have the same color as the normality distortion back in Inundation, the thing that tried to restore Nevada back to its normal form before Auditor's reign. It's interesting to how it seemed to be helping Hank, giving him new powers and recreating a new hand for him to fight effectively. This might be due to how it sees Hank as the most capable with his new form, his tactical/weaponry skills, and him being the reason Auditor started the AAH AAHW in the first place. That's why it sees Hank's fit to fight and defeat the Auditor, so that madness can finally be relinquished from Nevada. But as it is, in the last reason for the reason Hank getting sapped, Hank was technically the one who started Auditor's reign due to him being the one who made the sheriff activate the improbability drive and was the reason why AAHW was created. After the sapping done creating a new more human-like hand for Hank and giving him a new electricity power, he is now able to fight the Auditor more effectively, with him sapping the Auditor's spear, staggering him and denying him of his weapon, so that it would be easier for both him and Sanford to fight him up close. So this just irritates the Auditor even further. After retrieving its spear, it built itself a platform and revived the dead for Sanford and Hank to fight down below, much like how Jeb was able to create the zombies to help himself fight against Hank in Madness 1-5, but these undeads are more resistant than the zombie was. The electricity appeared once more to zap Auditor, posed a threat enough for the Auditor to retreat, implying that the new hand that Hank just acquired might be able to defeat or significantly do damage to the Auditor than any weapon they have used. Hank and Sanford then try to hunt after the Auditor via the hole the Auditor summoned. While Hank trying to attack the mech agent, he used the electricity from his arm to kill the mech agent, showing how powerful Hank is now. With his new power and his new semi-mech form, with him being able to withstand the mech agent multiple punches that didn't seem to hurt him that much and only just crushing the walls. Later, it seemed that the electricity are also coming out from the halo and wounding Auditor even more, and it seems that the electricity share the same color as the normality restoration. This might be due to Jeb's mission before dying and how it was most compatible with him as we've seen so far in the series, because it is one of the things to help restore the normality of Nevada. It also means that the reason Hank was zapped by the Halo is due to him being the person who brings some of the madness into Nevada. But the Halo still sees Hank as the thing that could actually kill the Auditor. While it couldn't reject the Auditor, it's still capable of weakening him. This new electric threat pushed it into wanting to absorb more bodies so that it could be able to withstand the electricity more and able to finish off Hank and Sanford more easily. But the latter two found him first. Hank then deals significant damage to the Auditor with the electricity, pushing it back, anchored it even more, so it began to absorb more bodies to be more durable, but it's still affected by the electricity every time Hank's crustacean arm punches it, so it begins to absorb all of the nearby body, but that also includes Tricky's body, reviving one of Hank's deadliest foes once more before the explosion happened. Due to three being wanting to occupy the same body, Hank grabbed Sanford and hurried down the stairs, showing that he might have grown some value to human life, at least to his allies. After Hank and Sanford came down from the ladder, out come skeleton armies, created by newly formed Tricky, with a resemblance of both his normal improbability form and his purgatory improbability form, and it immediately went after Hank. As Sanford was hurting by the noise Tricky made, Hank remains unbothered and prepared to fight Tricky at any moment. Due to his past experience with Tricky and how the clown keep creeping up and coming back and being an annoyance for him to deal with, Hank fight Tricky decently at first, before getting his crustacean's arm ripped off and shoved into the wall, bringing him into the Auditor Hell, which resembled the purgatory Hank been in. Now he has to face Tricky once more in the other place, the place where he went through hell both forms, trying to get out and defeat Tricky in. He immediately goes for a punch on Tricky and trying to throw the AAHW member's body after him, knowing that Tricky will be back and more crazier if he got away. But the Auditor, in the form of a spirit, ordered them to flee from this place, which they did, due to not wanting to get stabbed by the spike the Auditor summoned. Hank was split off from Sanford, leaving him alone once again to face his mortal enemy, but before that happened, the Auditors appears and took him into the ground. Hank appears once more later with the Auditor spike, signifying his arrival or with the help of the Auditor, and it's shown with Hank's severe crustacean arm being healed by the Auditor with more black shade on it. but still possess the electricity power. The reason for Auditor helping Hank is the same as the electricity helping Hank. It is because of the threat they both face, which is Tricky, a being that if isn't rid of can cause devastation losses to both Hank's allies and Auditor's plans. So the Auditor have no choice but to enhance Hank due to him being the only one to be able to go toe-to-toe with Tricky's current form and being a past rival to the clown itself. Hank then suplexed Tricky off the platform, slammed it with the platform that are now filled with spikes to try and crush the clown. But he knows Tricky might be able to survive, so he put himself in front of the gun so that he could grab the gun and shoot the clown after it re-emerged, and he's able to shoot Tricky into the abyss with a halo dropping on the ground. But Tricky appears once more and re-obtains the halo. Then he begins to fight Hank once more with both sides try to push each other off, with Tricky dragging Hank into the ground, but Hank able to push the clown off from his strength. Though Hank still got knocked off by the clown, Hank then is reunited with Sanford. Later, with him pushing Sanford out of the way, might be him saying, Tricky is mine to kill, or Tricky is too powerful for you to fight and survive. Either elaborate his hatred on Tricky or his values on his allies' lives. The fight is mostly Hank fending off the whole Tricky horde with Sanford as an assist to help on the sideline. Before reaching the end of the Auditor's hell, out come a giant Mac Tricky, whom Hank tried to smash its face, in like how he did with the previous Mac agent. Being able to rip its metal plate, Hank is too fearless of the Mac power to retreat. He keeps on punching and caving its face in with his bare hands, and punching it to the barrier to find a way to escape from this place. Before new hordes appear, Hank was taken to a place where the Auditor supplied him with weapons, with text popping up saying, "Violence required. Violence acquired," still showing how Hank's violent tendency was still with him throughout all these episodes, and only grown stronger with him facing the clown. After killing most of the hordes and the Mac Tricky, Tricky appears once more, and with the same angle Hank and Tricky used to be in 9.5, seeing his mortal enemy once more and in an vulnerable position for him to take advantage of. To both kill it and flee from this place, charges his sword with electricity and stabs Tricky in the face, pushing Tricky into the barrier, and killed Nevada Tricky in the process. So he succeeded. It seemed that his living status is still unknown. Either he died or he is unconscious like before. So, he seems to be the murderous psychopath he is. There's still things that kept consistent with him throughout the whole series. 1. Determination. As shown as early as Avenger, he would go at any length to complete his goal/mission. Whether it's to kill the sheriff or an insane zombie clown, he would do anything to take them down, as shown when he blew himself up to take down Jeb with him in Apotheosis, trying to escape the purgatory, even though there's more powerful beings reside here to take him down, and presumably killing himself to kill the clown at his last moment. 2. Mastery in combat. As shown in most of his appearance, he is skillful with weapons he acquired, whether it's a chainsaw or an empty guns. He's still able to fend off hordes and defend himself against threat he faced. With how consternation or physically weaker than antipathy, he was still tactical and strong in that form, with him being able to defend himself alone for so long before the retainer got to him. 3. Vengeance. Him wanting to avenge his death to kill the sheriff. Him wanting to kill any organization associated with the sheriff. Him wanting to kill Jeb, and him wanting to kill Tricky. 4. His value on human lives. He wants violence, of course, and would do anything to get that satisfaction. But as we've shown throughout this whole series, he's welcome to any help, either by his enemies or his allies. Like Tricky, who helped him defeating the retainer before Hank tried to kill the clown before he tried to kill him first, and him to Sanford, who he values enough to try and protect him from the threat they faced. Hank is an interesting character. He has no history, not much personality, and not much sympathetic trait, and yet he's still likable. Having no history, there's no indication on how he acquired the taste of violence, making an intrigue for the audience to wonder about his past. not much personality, allowing him to be the killing machine everyone loved when he first appeared on your screen, and not much sympathetic trait. In normal settings, these types of character are very hateable, and might fall into the character you love to hate category. But this isn't what happened with Hank. With his other two character traits present, it complements his lack of sympathy trait very well, due to we not knowing who he is before, and not much is shown to him as a person, allowing us to mostly focus on the sheer destruction, murder, and genocide he brings for us to watch, because that is what made him Hank. He's the definition of madness combat. Hey guys, it's me, Asleep, and thank you for watching this long video. I'm planning to do more stuff like this, and if you like stuff like this, comment down below, like and subscribe, maybe even share so it can help me a lot. And if you want to support me even further, you can join my membership down below. See y'all later.